animal, do not scream or shout. Other conspiracy theorists believe there may be something more to the story. Many point to the mysterious appearance of armed special forces during the search. Their presence in the area was explained as them having training nearby, but at least one mysterious commenter online claimed that this was bogus, saying that they were a retired Army commander. According to them, the Special Forces never respond to civilian missing persons cases, especially not armed. He found it unusual that in this case the Special Forces were there fully armed and searching for the boy. Moreover, the fact that those looking for him were highly trained in searching jungles and other rough terrain, but they could not find any signs of the child, made it even more likely there was something stranger going on. Of what exactly, he never elaborated. Today, the case of young Dennis Martin remains a mystery, and not a single sign of the boy has ever been found at all. Number 2. Charles Walton. It was February 14, 1945, when 75-year-old Charles Walton left home, heading to work at a farm known as the Firs. He lived in Warwickshire, England, with his niece Edith, whom he adopted when she was just a young girl. Charles was described as a quiet man and a loner. He didn't like socializing, but he wasn't hated and didn't have any known enemies. On that morning, he left his house carrying a slash hook and pitchfork, along with a walking stick which helped him with his arthritis. Charles was employed by Alfred Potter, the farm owner who was known for having a volatile temper. Later that evening, Edith came home to find the house empty, and she had expected Charles to be home by 4 p.m. Alarmed, she realized it was unlikely that he was out hanging with friends because of his solitary nature. She then gathered several neighbors who all went out looking for him. The group went to the field, and it was there that they found Charles. He was lying on the ground dead and had been severely beaten using his own walking stick. His throat was cut open by the slash hook he carried, and he had been stabbed through the neck using his pitchfork. Authorities realized the force of the stab was so strong it bent the tips of the fork as it hit the frozen ground. Moreover, during the autopsy, not only was his trachea severed, but he also had multiple broken ribs. To add to the grisly scene, his chest was also slashed with a cross mark. The murder was so gruesome, the local police asked for help from Scotland Yard to solve the case. Those people assigned were Robert Fabian, alongside Superintendent Alex Spooner. During the investigation, they looked at several possible suspects, including Alfred Potter, and they found several unusual things. For one, it was discovered that even though most people complied with the investigation, Fabian felt there was a strange wall of silence. They also found that a previous murder in Long Compton, just 15 miles from where Walton lived, had happened. That victim was 80-year-old Ann Tennant. She was attacked randomly by a man named James Hayward back in 1875. James was a local drunk who, out of nowhere, attacked Ann and killed her with a pitchfork in front of everyone. When asked why he did it, he said that it was because Ann was a witch. Curiously, investigators were able to track down a direct line from Ann Tennant to that of Charles Walton, and it was discovered that she was his great-grandmother. Another odd find is that of a curious story in an old book from 1929 titled Folklore, Old Customs and Superstitions in Shakespeareland, authored by Reverend James Harvey Bloom. In the story, set in 1885, it told of a young boy named Charles Walton, who encountered a phantom black dog while heading home on several nights. On the last night he saw it, it was accompanied by a headless woman. Some believe that the boy in the story was the same Charles Walton killed. Moreover, many in the town believed that Charles was a witch himself. They said he even had the power to cast an evil eye and was to blame for problems with the crops and livestock dying. As a result, he was killed in a ritualistic manner, wherein his blood was taxed to cleanse the ground. Although in the official investigation no mention of a ritualistic killing or witchcraft is noted, Robert Fabian, after 25 years, urged readers of his book to remember the case of Charles Walton. If anyone was tempted at any time to venture in black magic, witchcraft, shamanism. Apparently, he believed that Walton's death was the result of a pagan rite, but today, Charles Walton's death still remains unsolved. So there were two of the most mysterious and murderous stories around. Scary Mysteries, Twisted Twos. Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Lewis Hastings. Tales of hauntings, murder, and scary mysteries. Every week, Twisted Twos dives into a pair of uniquely terrifying true stories that are worthy of a more in-depth look. For this week, we focus on a twisted mother and her tortured daughter, and the story of a vicious serial shooter. Get ready for Scary Mysteries, Twisted Twos. Number 1. Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Mothers are supposed to take care of their children, but in the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother Dee Dee, it was almost nothing like that. They both lived in their Springfield, Missouri home for years, and on June 14, 2015, Dee Dee was found dead from multiple stab wounds, lying in a pool of her own blood. Police determined she had been dead for days before she was discovered. Meanwhile, neighbors and friends expressed concern for her daughter, Gypsy Rose, who was, according to Dee Dee, suffering from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, asthma, and only had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. It would take a full day for police to find Gypsy Rose alive and well in Wisconsin. They also realized she was not suffering from any of the illnesses that her mother had claimed. She was also an adult, and now one of the main suspects in her mother's murder. After days without news of her mother's body being discovered, Gypsy thought it best to alert people that something was wrong. She had her boyfriend, Nicholas Godjohn, use his phone to post ominous Facebook posts using Dee Dee's account. When friends and family saw the postings, they thought it was uncharacteristic of her, and then they tried to see if she was okay. The home was locked, and so they called police. Soon Dee Dee's lifeless body would be discovered. They traced the IP address from Facebook, and it led back to Nicholas's Wisconsin home, where they found him together with Gypsy Rose. But during the investigation, it became apparent that this wasn't a straightforward case of a daughter killing her mother to be with her boyfriend. Gypsy Rose was born to Rod and Dee Dee Blanchard, but they divorced in 1991 shortly after Gypsy was born. Ever since she was young, Dee Dee would claim that Gypsy had multiple health problems. For instance, at the time of her birth, she said that the baby had sleep apnea, but doctors couldn't find any signs of it. She would go on to say that her young girl had various health issues as a result of a chromosomal problem, and insisted that Gypsy be confined to a wheelchair. For a time, the two lived with Dee Dee's father and stepmother. It was here when the stepmom began getting sick, and they accused Dee Dee of poisoning her by mixing a weed killer into her food. Dee Dee, of course, denied it, got upset, and left with Gypsy, and sure enough, the stepmother recovered soon after the pair departed. Mother and daughter then moved to public housing and continued to seek public assistance for Gypsy's supposed health problems. Gypsy would be subjected to multiple surgeries during these times, including muscle biopsies, and was given anti-seizure medication because Dee Dee claimed she suffered seizures every few months. After Hurricane Katrina hit, Dee Dee said all of her daughter's medical and birth records were destroyed by the floods, and soon they moved to Missouri. Once there, they rented a place before Habitat for Humanity built them a home with a tub and wheelchair ramp to accommodate Gypsy's needs. Their plight received considerable amounts of attention, and soon donations began pouring in. The two stayed at Ronald McDonald houses, received free flights to Kansas during treatments, got tickets to Walt Disney World, special backstage passes to concerts, and of course various gifts. Rod Blanchard consistently sent child support payments to his daughter, but unknown to him, Dee Dee was telling people he was an abusive alcoholic who refused to ever pay the child support. Every time Rod tried to visit his daughter in Missouri, Dee Dee would come up with countless excuses and kept changing plans on him. She made sure to keep up appearances by shaving her daughter's head to mimic the look of a sick cancer patient. Whenever they left home, Gypsy had to have her feeding tube and an oxygen tank with her at all times. Mom was controlling her daughter's every move and used physical abuse if she ever stepped out of line. By this time, Gypsy had become an adult, even though her physical appearance made her look younger. At least one doctor, Bernardo Flasterstein, suspected Munchausen by proxy because he realized that all the tests and biopsies for Gypsy were negative. When Dee Dee found out about the suspicion, she simply stopped seeing him. Although social services were never informed, police did receive an anonymous tip from a caller asking them to investigate Dee Dee, citing she had given false names and birth dates for herself and her daughter. However, this was later dropped after Dee Dee reasoned she did this to hide from her abusive ex-husband. Eventually, Gypsy got fed up with her mother's antics and began seeking independence. She tried unsuccessfully to escape and tell people about her real age, which by this time was in her early 20s. In one instance, she was brought back home and handcuffed to the bed for over 2 weeks. In 2012, Gypsy met Nicholas Dodjon online and the two struck up a romantic relationship. In June of 2015, the girl invited her boyfriend to her house, at which point she handed him duct tape, gloves, and a knife, with the understanding he would kill her mom. Nicholas then ordered Gypsy to stay in the bathroom and cover her ears. Afterwards, he went to Dee Dee's room and stabbed her several times. Once the murder was complete, the two had sex and took $4,000 in cash before fleeing to a motel just outside of Springfield. Eventually, the two were captured, and the whole plight of Gypsy Rose was exposed. Nicholas was sentenced with first-degree murder, among other charges that are yet to be determined. Gypsy Rose was sentenced with second-degree murder as part of a plea deal and is currently serving 10 years in prison. Number 2. Louis Hastings.
Let me think. And I'm off.
On February 28, 1983, former computer programmer Louis Hastings went on a shooting rampage in the tiny village of McCarthy, Alaska. Described by his neighbors as a quiet man, Hastings initially grew up in Leawood, Kansas. Since he was young, he had been treated for chronic depression, but his family said he grew up as a caring adult, even offering his time to clean birds affected by an oil spill off the coast of California. He later became a computer programmer and began working at Stanford University in 1975. Several years later, he married a Stanford librarian. By the 80s, the couple quit their jobs and decided to move to Anchorage, Alaska. Both had dreamed of a quiet life in the wilderness, but Hastings grew increasingly troubled by the construction and operation of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. He believed it was destroying the Alaskan wilderness and decided it was his duty to stop it. The couple bought a small property 5 miles from McCarthy to escape the hustle of the city. But things worsened as Hastings' computer business and marriage began to falter. This led to his wife spending most of her time in Anchorage, while Hastings lived alone, isolated in the wilderness home. While there, he began compiling a list of names of Alaska's political and civic leaders. This included gathering their phone numbers and home addresses. He also collected guns, along with approximately 2,000 rounds of ammunition. The night before the shooting, he spent the night drinking with his neighbor, Chris Richards. The next day, Hastings took 2 pistols and returned to Richards' home, who had invited him over for a cup of coffee. But while inside, Hastings fired at him, injuring Richards' eye while another grazed his neck. Richards fought back and managed to injure Hastings, giving himself enough time to run away to the Kennecott Tourist Lodge. With Richards gone, Hastings went to Tim Nash's home nearby and set that cabin on fire before returning home to grab a Ruger Mini-14 with a makeshift silencer made from beaver fur. He then went to Les and Flo's Hegland's cabin, which also functioned as a post office. He shot the Heglands, including Maxine Edwards, who was there waiting for the mail plane. All 3 of them were shot in the head execution style and killed. Afterwards, Tim Nash arrived to warn them of Hastings, but he was too late. Hastings was waiting for him on the back porch. The two exchanged gunfire, with Nash escaping to the airfield, warning people about what was happening. Richards, who was injured, was flown out by pilot Gary Green, while Amy Nash decided to stay with her husband. Hastings soon approached and began shooting the Nashes, killing them both before dragging their bodies to hide them in a snow berm. 2 other residents arrived, Hartley King and Donna Byram, and both were initially shot at. Donna managed to flee while King was shot in the back of the head. Hastings tracked Donna but eventually lost her. By 11 a.m., another mail plane was scheduled to arrive, but the previous pilot was warned not to land because of the shooting spree. That pilot, Lynn Ellis, turned around and warned state police requesting assistance. Hastings most likely would have continued shooting people, but had run out of potential victims. In the meantime, he placed 2 duffel bags and other gear on a snowmobile and headed